If God had made a garden or a creation that was perfect, he would have made a world where Adam and Eve would have been lazy. But he does not create a perfect world. He creates a world with a little bit of chaos. In the same way that God crushes the chaos of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, he then commissions Adam and Eve to begin to crush chaos. Living sober means I'm experiencing life in a way that is congruent. The person battling with PTSD is battling with a brokenness, an incongruence, a chaos.
You and I hung out in person for the first time after like chatting on Instagram. And then you're like, hey, I think we had barbecue together, right? We had barbecue together.
Oh yeah, we had a layover in Dallas.
That's right. So you took me to Terry Black's. Yeah. And then we still had like an hour to kill. And you're like, yeah, I'll take you to a coffee shop. I have a call with a literary agent about a couple books I'm working on.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, hey, well, what are the books? Tell me. So you pitched me 3 ideas. You were like practicing your pitch because then you had to pitch it to the literary agent.
Yeah.
And one of them was Crushing Chaos. So that's like...
And at the time, it was called Kings of Chaos.
Kings of Chaos. Okay. That was like 2 years ago.
I said to you. Yeah.
That is what you said to me. Yeah, you're right. You did call it Kings of Chaos. And you're like, dude, Leviathan represents chaos in the Bible and God is like order. And, you know, everyone needs this message because there's so much anxiety. And I was like, you know, the passion was like oozing out of you. And then last year, when I was in the Arma studios, when they were still in Dallas, you guys were like going through like concepts for the cover, you and Elijah and a couple of the guys back and forth. So dude, I kind of feel like I've seen this book
You've been on this journey with me, man.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun. So tell us, I mean, we're in the interview now. So how's it feel to get this book ready to go and what should people be expecting?
Oh my gosh. I feel like this book honestly has like New York Times bestseller potential. I think that I wrote a book that is relevant, helpful, biblical, theological, philosophical. Like, I think it scratches every itch. I think that it's really, really, really like nerdy, heady, but it's also like insanely practical.
Love that.
I think it's a well-written book, dude. I think that there's chaos everywhere. I think there's chaos all around. I think that sometimes in church, because all we have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. And so the hammer that we have is, you know, every nail is sin. So the thing that we're constantly saying is like, well, that sin and that sin and that sin. It's kind of like a whack-a-mole trying to get all the sin. But there's tons of things in people's lives that are not sinful, but that are chaotic. And the reality is that sin is not the only thing that'll kill you. Chaos will kill you as well. And chaos untamed will ruin your life. The only problem is it's a slow burn, right? So like your marriage can be chaotic, or your soul can be chaotic, or let's say a pornography addiction that you're dealing with, it can be chaotic, or an alcohol, like over drinking here and there is chaotic.
Yeah.
And, you know, we hide chaos a little bit better than we hide sin. And there's all these forms of chaos, and the Bible has a lot to say about chaos. It's funny because part of the book, or part of the motivation for writing the book, is to help people with anxiety, to help people with just things that I think create chaos. And the unintended consequence is that people that have read the book already keep saying, I've never read something that's helped me understand the Bible better. I've never read something that's completely changed my paradigm on how to read the Bible.
Oh, wow.
Because the reality is that the word chaos doesn't really appear in many of our Bibles, but the symbols for chaos are all over the place. And so what I really spend a lot of time doing is helping people to interpret the Bible like an ancient Eastern person instead of like a modern Western person. And when you interpret the Bible like an ancient Eastern person, you begin to realize, oh, wow, there are dragons here and dragons symbolize chaos. So at the 30,000 foot level, it is like, it's this book is actually the product of my doctoral work, like my doctoral dissertation.
Okay.
And yeah, man, I spent like 200 pages of my doctoral thesis arguing that the creature in the garden with Adam and Eve was not a serpent, as we understand serpents, but was a dragon. And that would have been consistent with an ancient Near Eastern view of it would have been that would have been culturally consistent. And if that is true, then essentially the choice that was before Adam and Eve was whether or not they were going to partner with order or partner with chaos. And of course, we know exactly what they chose. And a lot of times all we're focused on is sin. But the reality, man, is that let's take me and my mother's relationship. Because my dad was an addict, me and my mother formed a relationship that was too close. So it was like we overbonded.
Yes, we call it enmeshment. In our world, it's called enmeshment. Yeah.
Exact. That is the literal term that my therapist used, enmeshment.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yep. And so my therapist essentially helped diagnose me with surrogate spouse syndrome. So like me and my mother had spousal level expectations of one another, even though we're mother and son. And no pastor had ever told me that that was sinful, because it's not sinful. But an enmeshed relationship is chaotic. It is absolute chaos. And one of the ways that God responds to the chaos of creation is by creating boundaries. So the water is chaotic. The sea is chaotic. And it's right there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness hovered over the surface of the deep. So that the deep there is the sea, the ocean depths. And then the Spirit of God hovered above the waters. So God takes these forms of chaos. Darkness is also a form of chaos. And he doesn't totally eradicate them, but he creates boundaries for them. So for the darkness, he says, your boundary is from, man, it's 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Like, that's your boundary.
Right.
For the seas, he creates dry land and creates a boundary between the seas and the land. The Garden of Eden is placed within a wider context of wilderness. And so the boundary is the gateway to Eden is a place of order, and everything outside of it is chaos. The fork in the road that I was in when I found out that me and my mother's relationship was dysfunctional, chaotic, crazy, all kinds of stuff, is, am I going to totally cut her off and stop talking to her? Or am I going to allow her chaos and dysfunction to infect my life and my family and my children? No, neither of these extremes is what God does. What does God do? He creates boundaries. He does the hard work of creating boundaries with chaos. And so, let's bring back a good old 2020 word, quarantine. He quarantines chaos. He gives it boundaries so that it does not just run wild, or just, and we live in a cut off culture. We live in a, just cut them off. If it ruins my peace, if it takes away from my joy.
Cancel culture,
oh my gosh. If you voted for someone I don't agree with, just, you're cut off. Don't talk to me. And we've lost a very godly ability to learn how to deal with chaos, to learn how to deal with things that are chaotic. Things that are chaotic don't require a complete eradication or, this compromise that just allows chaos to infect everything. It requires, and I'm giving a real example, by the way. My mother is someone that I've actually had to practice very, very, very serious boundaries with, and I dedicate a chapter to just kind of laying out what those boundaries have been. But the reality is that we encounter chaos in tons of forms all the time. I can't say that drinking alcohol is a sin. Like, I don't think I have biblical grounds to say it's a sin. Right. I know there are lots of pastors who do say it's a sin, and I respect that. Fantastic. I don't think that we have strong biblical grounds to call drinking a sin. However, I have watched drinking create chaos for tons of people. And again, if the only thing we're trying to gauge is whether or not something is sinful, then we miss out on what I think the Bible is begging us to ask, which is, does that create chaos? Because if we really look at the biblical picture is asking over and over and over and over again, are you going to get to the same, you will get to the same fork in the road that Adam and Eve were at. Yeah. And you will have to choose between order or chaos.
Yeah.
And choosing order does mean that you don't just ask whether or not things are a sin. So anyway, I'm excited about the book.
Yeah.
Super, super pumped about the book.
It's a cool
this
concept,
conversation
man.
could go
Yeah.
in a million different directions.
Well, it's just interesting. You kind of got my wheels spinning when you're talking about the Middle Eastern approach to interpreting scripture versus the Western world. Because I was thinking about it's true. Like we know that Jesus has defeated death. We know the enemy's been defeated, and yet even the enemy still exists today, right? Like he still gets to influence and whatever else. Like God didn't defeat him and then immediately just transport all of us to heaven. We still have kind of this interim thing called earth where, we get to live in oneness with Christ. We get to be discipled. We get to, step into all the good things that God has for us. And we still have to fight the temptations of the enemy and the agendas that are trying to pull against us. And that's kind of, it sounds to me like that's sort of the balance that gets struck here when you have chaos and order, I guess, in their proper places.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So without going on too big of a rabbit hole, right? Okay. Couple things. Number one, I've heard this preached in church so much and it grinds my gears. Okay. Eden was perfect. The Garden of Eden was perfect. God created a perfect world and then sin messed it up. Okay. There's nowhere in scripture that says that. That gets preached. That's not Bible. That's just people say that. They grow up hearing it. Adam and Eve messed up a perfect world. Okay. Riddle me this. If it's perfect, why the heck is there a serpent or a dragon just in the Garden of Eden to tempt them? No, that's number one. Number two, what is this knowledge of good and evil?
Interesting.
So how would there be knowledge of said evil if this is just some perfect world that God has created?
Right.
Number three, God uses the word good. The way that God describes the creation is good. This is good. And this right here, like this little theological point, is the foundation of millions of people's frustration with life. They have an expectation that a perfect God has the potential to create a perfect world. So therefore, my expectation is he's going to create a world, where I have the perfect job and I have the perfect spouse and I have the perfect life and I drive the perfect car and I live in the perfect house.
In Jesus' name.
Right. So we have this expectation of perfect, but come on, from one entrepreneur to another, God does not send you perfect employees. He sends you good ones.
Yeah.
Good ones. And it's your job to turn those good employees into fruitful, like really, really fruitful employees. He sends you a good spouse. He sends you good kids. He sends you things that are good. And the reality is this. If God had made a garden or a creation that was perfect, he would have made a world where Adam and Eve would have been lazy. But he does not create a perfect world. He creates a world with a little bit of chaos because God makes Adam and Eve in his image. In the same way that God crushes the chaos of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, he then commissions Adam and Eve to begin to crush chaos. Which is why, so think about this. If he created a perfect world, why do they get endowed with authority to subdue everything? They are given authority to bring things into dominion.
Right. Like, why would that be necessary if everything was perfect?
That's not necessary in a world that is perfect. So what we've done is it's almost like when we talk about the Garden of Eden, we talk about this paradise location. It's like we're talking about some island. It's Turks and Caicos, and they just get to kick their feet up and just enjoy, whatever, enjoy bliss. And then in the middle of bliss, here comes a temptation to ruin the bliss. And had that been the case, I don't know that the temptation would have worked. The reason the temptation works is because the garden that God places them in is not perfect, but it is good. And it's good that men and women have an adversary. It's good that we face temptation. So I had a roommate in college, so frustrated with his pornography addiction, threw his laptop out the window, broke the laptop. And, my initial response was like, man, I'm proud of you. The Bible says if your right hand calls you to sin, cut it off. So
Right.
I'm proud of you. However, you're going to have to learn how to live with a laptop and still choose purity. Like we can't just remove all laptops from life.
Can't just shut down the internet.
We can't just lock the internet down, man. That's not freedom. So a lot of us, I think our frustration is, if God wanted me to be holy or righteous or ordered, why would he even put a beast in the garden with me? Why would he put a tempter here with me? Why would there be a tree of the knowledge of good and evil? God doesn't want me to succeed. And it's like, no. On the contrary, he desperately wants you to succeed. And he knows that a part of you overcoming is having something to overcome.
Yeah.
So this is not some perfect island bliss.
Yes.
Which, again, that idea that God made a perfect world or perfect garden is a very Western idea. An Eastern perspective is not that God made something out of nothing. It's that God made order out of chaos. But what has happened in the Western world is that our big bad boogeyman is evolution and atheism. So like, we make Genesis say things that it doesn't really say to solve a problem that was not the problem of the original audience or the original authors. And so the original audience and the original authors would have been on a mission to show that Yahweh was nothing like Baal, that Yahweh was nothing like Ra, that Yahweh was nothing like Marduk, that Yahweh was nothing like the Babylonian, Mesopotamian, Assyrian, or Canaanite or Egyptian gods. And when you begin to appreciate the Bible in its original context, you begin to realize that God alone has the ability to take things that are chaotic and begin to bring order out of them. This is actually the secret that unlocks understanding the plagues on Egypt. God begins to prove to the Egyptians that their gods are not gods, because their gods don't have the power to sustain order. So the sun is a form of order. How does God deal with the chaos of darkness? He establishes the sun. How does God deal with the chaos of the deep or the sea that just has no boundaries? He creates rivers. So what happens in the plagues? The Nile begins to overflow its banks. All of the plagues are actually God showing your gods can't create order. I'm the only one that can create order. And if you want to worship other gods and not me, then you will have chaos in your life. So the plagues are just a physical manifestation of the chaos that ensues when we actually don't want the God of order and we think other things will bring us order. And God begins to go, I'm sorry, but these things cannot bring order. I am the only one that can bring order. And order's not just discipline. Order's not just, grin and bear it and don't do things. No, order is encountering the person of Jesus. And I would say that the first clue that we get to who Jesus is going to be is he's the dragon crushing, chaos crushing God of Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, which is the first announcement of the Messiah that we get after God has dealt with the serpent and then given consequences to Adam and Eve. So
it's so interesting.
Anyway, that you are spot on, sir. You are spot on, sir. God is not putting Adam and Eve in a garden that is perfect. That's not. And that's a false expectation.
Well, here's a thought I've been working on, because we've been helping guys quit pornography for a long time now. And this one word that kind of gets tossed around in purity context is often freedom, right? Like freedom from pornography and whatever else. And I'm working on this. I think if I have another book coming out in the next couple of years, it'll probably center around this, because I've realized that God actually ordains freedom for us in 3 arenas. There's eternal freedom, which is salvation. It's exactly what we're talking about, like, Jesus just crushing Satan and his dominion. There's external freedom. And I think those are like the 2 arenas that the Christian church in America really talk about, right? And it's that God wants you to have great quality of life and, all the things we talked about, the house and the cars and, all that stuff aligned. But the real emphasis, at least for my work right now, is actually this third realm, which kind of connects the two, and that's internal freedom. And when you were talking about the alcohol example earlier, it just got me thinking, because for some people, alcohol is like you said, some people draw the line that it's a sin. So it's just like you don't drink alcohol, and that's the way that you maintain order, to use our language for the conversation today, right? But then I know for me, like I'm fine to have a drink. It's not a big deal. But I also have other friends who can't have one drink, not because they think it's a sin, but because they know that their relationship with alcohol is bad and unhealthy. And it's not, the one drink could lead to more drinks, or it's just, I only go to alcohol when I cope. So what I want to ask you is, what's the application here for people who maybe we're not talking about the overt sin, where people are like, okay, I get that, I have some of these obvious sins in my life because there's chaos, and maybe I haven't let the God of order, have lordship in this area. But what about internally, where it's more nuanced, it can be more individual, and we're in a very anxious driven world where, like, I mean, you mentioned, like, there's not a lot of literal words for chaos. It's a lot more metaphorical, especially with that Eastern lens. But I mean, the Greek word for anxiety is basically chaos, right? It's fractured, fragmented. It's that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that, especially internally. So shed some light on how these concepts apply here.
Okay. This is great, because it's almost like we're building a vocabulary of how to deal with what we all know is, whether it's a chaos issue or a sin issue, or there's some problem, right? Like, humans aren't functioning the way that we were designed to function. And so how do what language do we come up with to help? So I'll throw another word on top of freedom that I think kind of gets down to the root of it, which I think is what the Bible's trying to get everybody to achieve, which is shalom. So that's wholeness. Okay. A lot of time, especially in a Western world, we're going to interpret shalom as peace, but shalom's not just peace. It's things are whole. And when things are whole, the members are at peace with each other. But wholeness, okay? So the opposite of wholeness is a fracturing, is a severing. So the biblical picture that's getting painted from Genesis to Revelation is that Adam and Eve are going to experience brokenness or fracturing in 4 areas of their life. Typically in the Western world, we only talk about how the cross reconnects one area and we leave the other 3 alone. I'm going to add one more word here just to the vocabulary dynamic, and then we'll break down the 4 areas of brokenness. In the 15th, 16th century, theologians are trying to come up with how to describe what Jesus accomplished on the cross. And it's like they can't come up with a word. So they create a word. It's actually quite beautiful. They create this word at one meant. They're like, what Jesus has done on the cross has made things that were fractured one again. That Jesus has created wholeness on the cross. And that word is what we now call atonement. So that idea that things have been fractured, severed, broken, but now they're one again. What Adam and Eve experienced because of chaos is a separation from God. So that's now broken. My relationship with God is broken. But then number 2, my relationship with myself is broken. Shame, guilt. Adam is no longer at one with himself. This is why the New Testament can say a double-minded man is unstable in all their ways. This is the experience of, like, my heart wants one thing, my mind wants another. My flesh wants one thing, my mind wants another. This is the fracturing of the self. 3, Adam becomes fractured in relationship with Eve. This is why any form of religion or spirituality that's void of reconciliation with my neighbor is not biblical reconciliation, because God says the first commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength, with all of the members working together in wholeness. Second, love your neighbor as yourself. The reason that most non-Christians kind of have a gripe with Christians. It's because we claim to love God, but don't always do a good job at loving people who are not us. Okay. And then fourth, he is Adam and Eve are both no longer at one with the ground in which they were taken. So they are at odds with purpose, with the call, their vocation, with the soil that they've been taken from. Okay. When Jesus comes into our lives, here's what we're really good at preaching. He wants to reconnect you with God. We preach that one a lot. So that's eternal freedom. That's what you're describing as eternal freedom. And then we may even preach external freedom, as kind of like the carrot on the stick to keep people motivated.
Right.
But real wholeness, is when I come to the place of I have to be one with myself. And not to be super Pentecostal, but this is probably where I plant my flag when it came to doctors telling me and my wife that I was infertile or that I would never have kids. I essentially was like, no, God has already said I'm a father, and that's true spiritually. So therefore, my body has to obey the order that heaven has already pronounced over my life.
Okay.
So order now says everything in my life has to come under alignment with what God is saying about me. So when God begins to say, I'm free, that is saying whatever members are not experiencing freedom internally, those members now have to come into cohesion, into alignment. My goal is to operate. And am I ever going to get to 100%? No, not on this side of heaven. But the goal is that I begin to operate. So even when you are saying, we got on the call before we press record, and you're like, dude, you look great. What are you doing? And I'm like, oh yeah, dude, I'm on carnivore. I'm working out. Okay. I don't just feel more alive. I feel more connected. My body feels more connected to my soul, and my soul feels more connected to my mind, and my spirit feels more connected to my body. That is actually the vision that God has for us, that we would be holistic, that every area of my life would be whole. And unfortunately, I have met a lot of people who essentially experience very ecstatic spiritual moments. They have ecstasy with God spiritually, but it's like they're out of shape, they eat bad, their mind is toxic, their thought life, their inner thought life is absolutely unhealthy, and that's chaos. That's chaos. and the world's not interested because you're clearly disconnected. There's something disconnected from the worship service on Sunday. And what it creates is the next generation doesn't want God. So typically you grow up in a home with parents who serve a ton and go to church a ton, and they say they believe in this God, but then there's actually no real order. Things are not cohesive. Things are not whole. My dad, goes to church, but also has an anger issue. It says he loves the Lord, but also, so my big question to anybody is okay, does alcohol bring the members of your body, your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, into more congruence, into more wholeness, or into more dissonance? Because if it brings the members of your being into more dissonance, oh, got it. It's a net negative.
Don't touch it. Not worth it.
Cut it. Absolutely cut it. But if you're saying, no, I don't feel incongruent. Awesome. Great. Then that means you're also never crossing the threshold of drunkenness. Because the reason that drunkenness is really a problem is that you're not in full power of your faculties.
Yes.
So it means drunkenness literally is a total disconnect between your mind and your body. And this is why his focus is not on drinking alcohol. his focus is on sobriety, because sobriety, just living sober, means I'm experiencing life in a way that is congruent. Also, dude, now that like this is the goal, it opens up the conversation for so much. It's the person battling with PTSD is battling with a brokenness, an incongruence, a chaos. And so now we've got language for how we can walk that person into congruence, order. The person battling with infertility, there's nothing sinful about me and my wife battling with infertility, but gosh, it's chaos because I know what God has said, but then my body's not doing what it's supposed to do. So now I'm believing God for healing, but I'm believing God for healing through the lens of I know that things have to come into alignment. So if atonement is the goal, which I think it should be, like I think that's the framework.
Yeah.
Then now forgiveness becomes a means to achieve wholeness. I don't want to walk in brokenness with my wife. I don't want to walk in brokenness with my own members. I don't want to walk in any forms of brokenness because, man, sin severs, it cuts. That's why the wages of sin is death. Because if I cut my finger off, my finger can't live disconnected from my body.
Yeah.
So the big issue here, the big picture, if I were to like go 30,000 feet, the big problem that the Bible's saying it has to be solved is brokenness. And anyone who's ever read Romans, like I do what I don't want to do. The thing I want to do, I don't do. Like this is you at war with yourself, and God's grace wants to come into your life so that you can first be at peace with yourself. Like, but that's, and everything flows out of that. If you ask me, when there's internal freedom, every wealth flows out of that. Ideas that generate wealth flow out of that. Dominion flow out of that. Dude, oh my gosh.
All of it.
Oh, everything. Your heart is the wellspring of life. And everything flows out of that well. Everything. What's sad is that because we focus on external and eternal freedom, it's almost like internal freedom's the last freedom to get talked about. But the reality is that it's the most important. It's the most important. Because guess what? When there's internal freedom, external and eternal freedom are almost automatic. They take care of themselves. Like when there's internal freedom, oh man. That's why I can't have internal freedom without me and God being good. It's not even possible. And then if I focus on internal freedom, literally, it's a domino. The next domino doesn't have a choice. I always will. So I'll say it this way, and this is how I say it in Crushing Chaos, is that Jesus wakes up, out of his, sleepy stupor and calms the storm. Well, storms are symbols of chaos in the ancient world. Okay. And so there's this nerdy little nugget. Okay. Mark chapter 4, verse 39. In Greek, Jesus gets up, he stands up and he looks at the storm and he says, peace, be still. That word be still, that Greek word is phomao. We see that same word in Timothy and in Corinthians, and it's Paul saying, don't muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. So that Greek word phomao, that Greek word actually should not be quiet, be still. It should be quiet, be muzzled. Okay, so Jesus recognizes that Leviathan is behind the storm. This is what's the New Testament is depicting Jesus as the chaos crusher. It's just we don't have eyes for it because we read the Bible with a Western lens. And anytime you can sleep in the middle of a storm, that is the only moment when you can wake up and calm the storm, because you can only have external authority when you first have internal authority. If you can't sleep through a storm, you can never speak to the storm and calm it. And most of us, the reason that we want to control things that are external to us is because we don't have control over the best thing to have control over, which is ourself. All anxiety, not all anxiety is, I don't want to diminish anxiety, but one of the massive fuel one of the things that fuel anxiety like crazy is I feel out of control. So therefore, I'm going to try to control a bunch of stuff that I can't control.
Yeah.
And the reality is that God doesn't give control to Adam and Eve. He gives authority to Adam and Eve. And most often we lose our authority by trying to control things that we cannot control.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's so good, man. It's so, I mean, a gazillion thoughts off of all that. But the one thing that really strikes me is I kind of have a theory that this is also why you see a lot of moral failures, is because I think the internal freedom piece is the biggest indicator of longevity and sustainability of a person's life. And I think when you don't have enough internal freedom to support the external freedom you might be after, whether that's a big church or a big business or climbing the corporate ladder or whatever, that's where you see these hard falls, right? Because people don't have that internal, that integrity and that freedom to really kind of sustain them. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you, what are practical ways that believers can bring order to the chaotic parts of their life, regardless of which arena we're talking about?
Dude, Genesis gives a massive roadmap, right? So I would say, and I can't give all 7 because we don't have time, but Genesis gives us 7 forms of order. I'll give a couple. Okay. The first is sequence. Certain things go before others. So that's order. Sequence is one form of order. This is just easy, right? Like sex goes after marriage, not before. You put it before and you're going to get chaos. Like, period. You put sex in its wrong order and chaos ensues. You can see this as a really simple thing when it comes to like baking a cake, right? You can have all the right ingredients, but if you put the steps in the wrong order, you're not going to get a cake. You're going to get chaos. So sequence is really, really, really important. Sequence. Just, hey, the first 10% belongs to the Lord, not the last 10%. Not the leftovers. We don't tip God. We tithe. Okay. So like order, sequence, like, man, we worship at the top of the week as a family. That I do a confession with my son in the morning. We have a bedtime routine. Like there's just a sequence. There's a sequence to life. There's a time to do everything. Okay. Yeah. And so following some kind of sequence when it comes to major life decisions, you know, I always tell, you know, people in their 20s, specifically men, like, hey, until you have blueprints, don't grab bricks. Okay. Don't build your life until you have a vision from the Lord. Sequence, blueprints before bricks. Like you can't choose a spouse before you know what you've been put on this planet to do. Like you got to have clarity around your purpose and a vision for your life before you go off having children and multiplying chaos. So here's an easy one for sequence. The Bible says, God says to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. So one of the things that I learned in my doctoral program is that little Hebrew word that we interpret as and actually should be interpreted as then. Be fruitful, then multiply.
No way. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Because here's the enemy's goal is to get unfruitful people to multiply.
Right. Increase the chaos.
Increase the chaos. Right? So guess what? The 5 years that me and my wife walked through infertility, guess who we never saw at the fertility clinic? I never saw a crackhead at the fertility clinic. I never saw chaotic people. The only people who were struggling with infertility were Christians, tax-paying citizens, upstanding citizens. Like, dude, when I used to work for the Department of Child Protective Services in Boston, Massachusetts. And we'd go to houses where like 9-year-olds are drinking alcohol and people like kids are getting molested, and we'd have to remove kids from homes. And the more chaotic families we went to, like entrenched in poverty, entrenched in dysfunction, you're talking 7 kids, 8 kids, 9 kids, 10 kids, like, because the enemy wants to multiply chaos. So here's God's sequence. Be fruitful first, then multiply. Be fruitful first. Focus on fruitfulness. We as a culture want to focus on multiplication. So But this is the same. This is different language for the same thing you're saying. If you focus on fruitfulness, which is internal freedom, multiplication will take care of itself, which is external freedom. But you can't think house, car, wife, spouse, kids before I think love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Am I fruitful? Before I go off trying to multiply this, is it even fruitful?
Wow.
So same thing with, one time I was working at a church and we were trying to decide whether we should be multi-site. And I was probably the contrarian view. And I was like, we shouldn't be multi-site until the first location is fruitful. Like, why would we copy and paste chaos all over the state? Like, hey, can we get this to be fruitful? I don't think we should be having a multi-site conversation because cancer also multiplies. So just because things are multiplying doesn't mean it's growing, doesn't mean that it's good. So sequence, that's a sequence. Having a mindset that says, I'm going to focus on fruitfulness. God will do the multiplication. I have to focus on fruitfulness. So just one element of order, sequence.
Yeah.
Sequence. The next one.
Okay.
Hierarchy. One element of order is hierarchy.
Controversial, Manny. Controversial.
Oh man, people are going to hate me. Okay. But can't make this stuff up. When you take a present, healthy father out of the home, incarceration rates go through the roof, poverty rates go through the roof, abortion goes through the roof, anxiety goes through the roof, depression goes through the roof. All mental health factors are up and to the right when you take present, committed dads out of the home. So it doesn't matter how people feel about it. The reality is that anything God wants to protect, he makes sure there's a hierarchy for it. So he cares about women and children. Therefore, he places men to be a covering, to be a servant leader for the home. If God cares about it, there's going to be hierarchy. Okay. So a pastor or bishop or elder or deacon, these are not man-made words. These are not man-made ideas. This is God. Like, the Bible says to the church, Jesus gave apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, and pastors. So Jesus gave this stuff to the church. It's his gift. So hierarchy. I'll be honest, man. My dad took me to a crack house for the first time when I was 5. He was incarcerated for 18 years. It was not until I got healed of my disdain for male authority that God could even bring some good spiritual fathers and uncles and brothers into my life so that I could be submitted to someone's authority. So hierarchy, hierarchy. I know we've created this world where I get to decide who I marry and I get to decide what I major in college and I get to decide, what I do for work and I get to decide this and that and this and that and this and that. Well, guess what? How has that gone? Well, it's produced anxiety, okay? Because people are crushed under the weight of having to make every single decision about their own life for themselves. And the reality is that I didn't start preaching because I woke up one day and I thought, how about I fall in love with hearing myself talk? That's not what happened. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to do something else with my life. My pastor looked at me and said, there's a call of God on your life to preach. I was minding my business. I was traveling and speaking. I was at a staff meeting at Social Dallas on a Tuesday, and Pastor Robert said, I want to meet. I want to see you in my office after church, after this meeting. And I walked in his office and he said, this morning when you walked in, the Holy Spirit told me that you're called to be a senior pastor and you should plant a church. It's not I tell my leader my dream. That's chaos. There's someone that I've given some authority to, that I'm under them in hierarchy, and they begin to call some things out of me. They begin to demand greatness from me. I'm shocked at the amount of men who want their wife to submit to their authority, but they don't submit to anyone's authority. Which essentially means you want to model pride, but demand humility. This is craziness. So,
Right.
so hierarchy, just, and I can go on and on and on. There's seven forms of order. There's 7 elements of order.
Give us one more. Give us one more that's like less obvious. I mean, and not that being obvious is bad, but is there one that like might surprise people?
Rhythm, that your season for sowing and your season for harvesting are not the same. That one of the things that God establishes when he establishes creation is seasons. That it's not always winter. It's not always spring. It's not always summer. That rhythm is what tells Joseph there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And you know how many entrepreneurs I know who live as if the 7 years of plenty are going to last forever? And they don't store up anything in the 7 years of plenty so that they can make money in the 7 years of famine.
Yeah.
So Joseph was able to grow Egypt's economy in the 7 years of famine. Why? Because he understood rhythm. Rhythm. Everyone who freaks out about recessions just don't understand rhythm. Yeah, it's just rhythm, man. It's just a cycle. It's not always harvest time. There's rhythms. There's rhythms. And you got to know how to steward your team. You got to know how to steward the season. You have to know how to steward the rhythm. There's a rhythm to life. You work for 6 days. You take 1 day off. You work for 6. You take 1 off. You work for 6. You take 1 off. You start to break the rhythm and you start to act more like a machine than a human. So God says there's rhythm. There's just rhythm. There's just rhythm. There's a time for peace. There's a time for war. There's a time. There's rhythm to life. And, you know, I've taken up golf, over the last year.
Oh, you did. You were talking about it last year. You were thinking about it. You're like, I think this could open some doors for me.
Oh, it's changed my life. It's given me more internal freedom than external freedom. I got into it thinking it's going to open doors for me.
Character building.
It's going to be great networking. But my golf instructor's name is Gary. Anytime he feels like I'm just forcing it, I'm swinging too hard. I'm trying to make the ball do something instead of what it naturally does. He just goes, hey, let the rhythm hit him. Let the rhythm hit him. Let the rhythm hit him. And it's just like, okay, I need to get into a rhythm. So I would say sequence is a great element of order. Man, hierarchy. Hierarchy is the one we probably hate the most. You know, I don't want anybody telling me what to do.
Yeah.
In rhythm, like, dude, there's 7 years of plenty. There's 7 years of famine. That's good. There's recessions. Yeah. There's economic recession. Yeah. What are you shocked? Like, what? Yeah. This is not shocking. This is the time when like millionaires become billionaires, man. There's people who've been waiting on a recession for a really long time.
Yeah.
I stored up in the 7 years of plenty so that I'd be cash heavy when this next recession comes so I can take advantage of economic opportunity. This is rhythm. This is a rhythm. Like, hey, if I'm in harvest mode all the time, when does my team disciple everybody? If we're just getting people saved nonstop and we never stop, when do we get everybody into small groups? When do we get them biblically literate? If we just catch fish, when do we clean fish? There's got to be some kind of rhythm. So what is the rhythm? Everything can't feel like the week before Easter all the time. Like I'm going to have burnout on my team if everything feels like go, 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 go.
Yeah.
All the time. There's never a rhythm for rest. There's never a rhythm to enjoy the harvest. Or I can't have an expectation that sowing is going to happen while the same time reaping is happening. That's not how life works. There's a rhythm to life. And sowing, I'm reaping.
It's interesting to think that doing the same thing or expecting the same thing over and over again, like not having this concept of rhythms, is actually disorder and chaos. Right. Like, I think this is kind of the point you made at the beginning of this interview, which is that it's not always what you think, that like chaos isn't necessarily everything's just like spray fire and scattered. Like you're saying, sometimes chaos is just doing the same thing again and again in season and then trying to do it out of season and trying to make it work. Right. So it almost sounds like
married people who I tell them, you no longer have romance. You just have a routine. And actually, you've replaced romance with a routine. And you think that because you have a routine, you have romance, but you don't. This marriage is boring, and the boredom is going to kill everybody. So at some point, There's a level of spontaneity. This is why God says there's an amount of chaos that's controlled chaos. It's good. It's good. Chaos with no boundaries is bad.
Yeah.
But the chaotic, I would say that chaotic spark that's in every entrepreneur. Oh my God, that's good. There's a chapter of the book where I just talked to entrepreneurs. It's one of the elements of chaos in the Bible is desert. And desert is opposed to garden. So desert wilderness is not the garden. And so there's a guy named Steve Blank who's done a bunch of research on entrepreneurs. You may have you may be familiar with this. Essentially, he has claimed and made a really good argument that the majority of entrepreneurs are successful because they come from chaotic homes. Okay, so it's not hard, so over at Manny Arango Ministries and Arma Studios, payroll ran yesterday. You know what I mean? So for most entrepreneurs, if your dad took you to a crack house when you're 5, running payroll is not scary.
Yeah,
it takes a lot to unnerve me,
right?
Because I'm a little desensitized to the chaos of what's required of just like running a business and running a company. Like part of the thing that employees are employees because they like predictable. What makes a good entrepreneur a really good entrepreneur is actually mastering ambiguity. So being in ambiguity and not being swayed or thrown off guard or just like embracing the ambiguous. Most of the time my team asks me so what's the plan? Like, what are we doing? And I'm like, I don't know. That's what makes me a good entrepreneur is that I don't know. I'm looking I'm constantly on the lookout for the next thing. So Steve Blank, comes up with all this research about entrepreneurs. And then what shocked him was the conclusion that it's not just that entrepreneurs are desensitized to chaos, but that they're addicted to chaos. So what'll happen is that an organization will get stable. An organization will get through the turbulence.
Yeah.
They'll get to 30,000 feet, okay, cruising altitude.
Yeah. Then the entrepreneur comes in.
Have hired operations people and administrative assistants to keep things orderly. Yeah. And then the entrepreneur is bored with the success and will throw the proverbial grenade into the company to create chaos because they're addicted to chaos. And so
it's like a self-sabotaging kind of thing.
It's a self-sabotaging thing, which I also think is part of what's happening with moral failures in the church. I think that there are a lot of guys who are throwing the grenade in because they're burnt out, they're tired. And notice this, people don't have moral failures in the planting process. They have moral failures once things are stable.
Yeah.
Once you take the risk away, it's almost like
there's no thrill.
There's no thrill. And so they start to find thrill.
Yeah.
So understanding how entrepreneurs are even wired helps us to just deal with chaos, deal with the chaos that comes along. And so on our team, we're really, really honest. So here we go. Because one of the forms of order is boundaries, okay?
Okay, right.
Is we give boundaries to my chaos. So one of the things is I get one crazy idea a year, okay? One Hail Mary, one we could lose everything.
Okay, like one idea that they'll actually execute on. Because I know you probably have a crazy idea every week, but one...
Every week.
Right, but one that that you're actually going to pull the trigger on.
So last year, it was the Bible department. Let's create 365 podcast episodes and lead people through a daily journey of encountering the Bible. Let's do it. Well, it was my crazy idea, and it worked. Not only did it work, it has brought more revenue into the organization because Arma never had free content anywhere. In the moment we started releasing free content every single day, it became an on-ramp. And retention has gone way up. Cancellations have gone down. But on our team, we have this saying that we never say no but we raise the cost. So it's not, hey, Manny, no, we can't do that crazy idea, because guess what? It is my crazy ideas that have created a company.
Yeah.
And if this company becomes a place that's just boring to me, then knowing yourself enough to know, I'll throw a grenade into it.
Yeah.
It's liking controlled chaos as opposed to, I guess I'll say it this way. I'd rather have the chaos I can control than chaos that controls me.
Yeah.
And it's knowing how to harness the power of chaos in a way that is advantageous to the organization. So the team never says no. They're not like, hey, Manny, no, we're not going to do that. It's okay. If we do that, we can't do this. If we do that, it's going to cost this. If we do that, it's never no, we're not going to do that. It's just making me aware of what will it cost to do this.
Yes.
And anyway, I could talk about chaos all day. I mean, which is why I wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah.
Because again, the entrepreneur who's bored isn't in sin. They just need to know how to navigate their nature. God wired us to see something out of nothing. God wired me to be driving down the street and go, that could be our offices. That's the way that God's wired me. And so, but I can't throw the whole organization, 6 employees plus 5 contractors, into upheaval every single time I have a creative idea. I have to have an outlet for those creative ideas that doesn't cause a whole dumpster fire in an organization. And now the operations people who I've hired are just cleaning up my chaos all the time. So Anyway, okay, I hope I'm like,
I want the book just for that chapter for entrepreneurs. That's good. It's really good.
Dude, it's a good chapter. It's a good chapter. It's essentially that whole chapter is the idea that, so there's 2 realms of chaos in the Bible. The first one is the sea, and humans know they can't exist underwater. Well, everybody except the people on the Titan submersible understand that you can't exist underwater. Okay. So, but the second picture for chaos is the desert versus a garden. And the reality is that humans can live in the desert. They can. They can. It is the realm of chaos that humans actually can live in. They just don't thrive. And so what begins to happen when you're in the desert, you start to adapt. And what should have been a feature now becomes culture. So what should have been a season just becomes culture. So the people of Israel, the reason that God has to take, nobody who walked through the wilderness for 40 years can go into the promised land, is because a lot of times we take the chaos that we learned and we try to bring it into the gardens that God wants to give us. And for every entrepreneur, you've got to realize there are desert ways, there are wilderness ways that you learned, but God does want to bring you into a garden. And for me, with the entrepreneurs I disciple, I always let them know, hey, the dude who's in the boardroom, you can't bring that guy home. Your wife doesn't need that guy. Your kids can't deal with that. For me,
no good.
What I would say to myself is Theo does not need Pastor Manny. Theo needs a father. He doesn't need a shark. Theo doesn't need the negotiator. Theo doesn't need the dude who can get the 7-figure book deal. That's not what my son needs. And most entrepreneurs, they don't have any sense of, this is who I am outside of my house, and then this is who I am like with my family. There's no it's one mode, and I'm in that one mode all the time. And I began to realize I was tracking sand into a garden every day. I'd leave for work. I'd leave, go hunt, and come back. And dude, I'm tracking blood through Tia's house. I'm like, Tia's my wife, obviously. And there had to be, if I want my son to grow up and even be interested in taking over my company or not squandering what I've built, then I've got to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And I've got to have boundaries around the chaos, and I have to let the chaos be a blessing, not a curse. And I have to use all of this stuff as assets and not as liabilities. So that chapter is very, 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 very helpful. Obviously, if you ask me, I think chaos applies to every single area of life. It gives you a framework for every single area of life. Last thing I'll say. I know we're at the hour mark. Here's the coolest thing in studying all this for me is that Adam was not created from the soil in the Garden of Eden. He was actually created from the soil of the wilderness and then brought into Eden, which means that order is never something that feels natural to the human experience. So we have created a culture that prides itself on authenticity. But the reality is that the most authentic version of you is chaotic. And at some point, order is going to have to be imposed on you. So like this idea that like, oh, that doesn't feel natural to me. Go ahead and buckle up because order does not feel natural. However, it is how we thrive and flourish. So what is natural does not lead to flourishing and growing and fruitfulness. And the reason that God banishes Adam and Eve back to the wilderness is because God's garden is not a right, it's a privilege. And if they want to act chaotic, then they get banished into chaotic space. And if they want to act orderly, they get blessed. They get the privilege of being in God's ordered space. And that for me was so helpful that one of the skills that I have as a leader is knowing how to navigate the wilderness. But just because I know how to navigate the wilderness doesn't mean that I'm called to live out in the wild. I have to become someone who can navigate the wilderness, but still walk in the promised land and not eliminate myself from even being eligible to walk into the promised land that God has for me because I've adapted so heavily to the wilderness. And I've got to allow the order of God to be imposed on my soul so that I am wild enough to be wild, chaotic enough to be chaotic, but ordered enough to actually lead a family and to be fruitful and to flourish and walk with God.
What a great conversation, man. So, you and I we could always keep talking. So one of these days we'll schedule it like a Rogan style, like 3 hours, and we'll just get it all off the table. But yeah,
we should do it once a year. Me and you, Rogan style, 3 hours.
Next time I'm in Texas, let's set it up. Let's do it. Let's do a really long one, and let's just see what happens. Yeah,
I love talking to you. You're so easy to talk to.
Oh, dude, and there's just so much to glean from you. Crushing Chaos is the book. When does it come out? What's the release date?
May 6th. So
May 6th. Okay.
4 or 5 days away.
This thing will be out by the time this interview comes. So go get your copy of it. Let's get Manny onto the New York Times best-selling list. Come on, people. Go show some love. Get your copy of it. Manny, much love to you and your team, man. Thanks for being here today.
Dude, I love you so much. Till next time. Peace.